Hi everyone. Today I felt like doing some hacking, but I didn't know what to hack on. So I started searching through Reddit and I found a nice post about someone who's doing a shell terminal in Rust. And I thought, and they wanted someone to give them a code review. So I thought, oh, that's a cool idea. Let's do this code review so we can kind of do some hacking and have some fun. So grab yourself a coffee, get yourself a nice robe on, and get your toque on, and let's have some fun here. So this fellow's doing a shell terminal in Rust, and he wants some feedback on his code. So let's kind of go through the process of how we give some feedback on a code as a senior developer. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to get his code. So on GitHub here, I'm going to grab the code and I'm going to git clone it, and I'm going to call it code review. And I'm going to jump into it. And I no longer need this window, so I'm going to close it off. And first thing that we want to do is we want to kind of check out to make sure that he doesn't have any build scripts in it. And if he does have a build script, that it doesn't do anything malicious. So we'll do a find for build RS, and he doesn't have a build script. Therefore, when we compile this project, the compilation of it won't do anything malicious on our computer. So we can start off our hacking by compiling it and feel safe about the compile. Before we run the project, we want to look at the code to see if the code doesn't do anything malicious. But for right now, we're just looking at just compiling it, and then we'll look at the code after compilation. All right, so my CC is an alias to cargo check. And as we do a cargo check, we see that it does compile, but there's a few things wrong here. So there's a few warnings before we go on. So let's clean up those warnings as the first thing that we do. And that first warning is on line 103, and it's this before exec, and before exec is deprecated because it's implicitly unsafe. So what we want to do is change it to the pre-exec, because that is the new version. But the problem with pre-exec is that it's also, we have to use the unsafe keyword because it's unsafe. So this gets us into a little bit of ugly code here, but we have to do it because this code is unsafe. And we no longer need the unsafe code inside of the pre-exec. So let's get rid of that. And let's see if that runs and it got rid of the problem. Yes, it did. Okay. Second stage is that on line 35, last exit status isn't being used properly. So line 35, this isn't being used properly. He's setting it to true, and then he's setting it in both cases of a match statement that do not exit. So it's kind of useless to do this. However, it's also a bit redundant to do what he's doing here. So let's change this to last exit status becomes the match on these things. And we will simply delete all of this. And that should get rid of that warning. Oh, and we need to, of course, if we're going to make it a statement, we need to semicolon it. And the last thing is right in our editor, it says you don't need to mute this command. So do that. And we no longer have any warnings during the compilation. First phase done. So let's save ourselves here for a git commit. So git status and git add main commit. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is check the cargo format to see if it formats nicely. So format is a nice way to kind of present your code to others, because if your code is formatted in a standard file, it's easier for other people to read. So first of all, let's check that. So cargo format -- check. And we see that there's a few things that are not according to formatting. And the easiest way to get rid of that is because we're in an empty kind of no changes environment right now, we can cargo format that without the dashes, and it will automatically format all of the code to the standard Rust formatting style. So we do that, we see that we now have some edits, and if we want to see what those edits are, you can do a git diff tool equals whatever your tool is. I use meld. So if I hit that, and then I hit yes here, I'm going to get meld to show me what the edits are that I made, or that it made, the Rust format made. Okay, there's only one thing I don't like here. I like to separate my external crates from std, and I do that by putting all of std first. Oops, this is not them. So I need to Control X that. So I like to separate it this way so that all of the standard is kind of together, and then all of the external crates that are listed in cargo.toml's dependencies are there. And then after that, all of the internal modules are included. So yeah, that's the one thing that I will change from how standard format does things. And let's check tokens as well. All right, nothing weird here. We'll save that. And we will make sure that it compiles again. It does. And we will save ourselves at this state as well. So cargo clean, git status, git add source star, commit. Cargo format. Okay, so those are the first two steps. The last kind of easy step is going to be looking at the results of a cargo Clippy. So let's do a cargo Clippy, and this is probably going to spit out a lot of warnings here, and we will address these one by one. And because I don't like to scroll all the time, I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. So the first one to look at is on main line 133. And what it does not like is that this developer is using a match statement when an if let will do just fine. So let's change that to, instead of match, let's do an if let error becomes this environment call. And now we don't need this, we don't need this, we don't need this, and we can left shift both of these, making ourselves a bit cleaner. And while we're at it, I see something that I personally don't like, and that's like return statements here. So let's clean up these return statements that we don't necessarily need by doing this. Okay. Do we still compile? Yep. And let's cargo Clippy that and go on to the next one. All right, main line 107. What's on line 107? It does not like that he is being explicit with the false when a simple not in background will do. And that should take care of that one. So let's fix that. Okay, on to line 118. It doesn't like that he is returning false here. He doesn't need that. I bet he doesn't need any of these. So let's fix this up the way that I would do it, ignoring what Cargo Clippy says right now. So I'm going to take away this. I'm going to take away this. Take away this. So we might want that. Actually, we don't even need this because we can do an if let some token become orcom. No longer need the match. We can do a whole lot of left shifting here. We don't need that anymore. Don't need that. This belongs with this now. And we don't need a return call. And what does it not like what I did here? All right. It was just the the Rust format wasn't looking properly. So we are compiling, right? Yeah. So cargo clean, CC it. Ah, okay. There is something going wrong here. What am I doing wrong? Ah, okay. We don't want that. All right. Okay, so what's the next Cargo Clippy suggestion? It's in main line 85. So let's go to 85. And these things, this return is unneeded. And on to line 56. It does not think you need to do all of this work. It thinks you need to do a ends with. On to line 45. Again, we don't need to be explicit with the equals false. Next one is on token RS line 65. So let's open up token RS. Line 65. And I don't like that he's using the variable name str because that is a type in Rust. And I just don't like that. So I am going to, first of all, change str to just s. One more change. Two more changes. All right, and now the Clippy wants us to not explicitly check to an empty string, but rather do a not is empty. Empty. And then it wants us to change this from a match to an if let. Okay, so let's do that. If let sum s becomes foreground. No longer need that. We no longer need this. And we can left shift this. Take away this. Does that compile? Yes. Cargo Clippy that. Okay. Before we move on to the next step, I don't like this. I don't like this empty else. I don't think we need it, so I'm just going to get rid of it. And the next thing I don't like is that these push commands don't have semicolons at the end. That kind of gives me weird vibes because it says it's kind of tells me it's returning something or it's setting a variable when push has no return value to it. So we'll put some semicolons at the end there. And then we'll put in some extra lines here so it's a little bit easier to read. I wonder if saying pop would be better than next back, but that's kind of a next stage of review. Okay, so moving on to tokens line 56, and again, it wants to check for is empty rather than checking if it's not equal to an empty string. So that's pretty easy to do. Moving on, you can collapse this else statement to an else if. Okay, and that's back on main. So line 110, we can collapse this to an if let. Yeah, okay. Okay. Moving on, and we are all done. So let's check the cargo format of that. And we are ready to commit a stage 3. All right, so now we want to actually start looking at the code. And take a drink of coffee. And we will start at the beginning. This stuff. So he's catching some signal interrupts. He's doing something with this last exit status. He is setting up an editor and doing some unwraps. And I really do not like unwraps, so we're probably going to change that. And I see that he's kind of calling this format over and over and over again. So this is prime candidate to be set to a variable. So let's do that first thing first. And this is going to be our rush history file. So let's make a rush history file at rush history become format. I wonder if we can just do it like this. What looks better? This looks a little bit better like that. So we'll do it that way, and then we will now use that variable instead of recalculating what the thing is over and over. Rush history. history. All right. Does that compile? Does that pass a check? Does that Clippy nicely? Yes, okay. We will keep going. So, how do we get rid of these unwraps? So this thing here is from Rusty Line Editor. And it looks like this. Self with config, and it will return a result, and with config will return a result. So it's setting things up here, and it's using this terminal new, and this terminal new returns a result. And this is all still in Rusty Line. All right, so the result is out of our control. But I think we can safely assume that our editor new should never ever error, and if there is an error, it's not it's not a user facing error, it's an error on programming. So rather than having an unwrap for an error on programming, I'll do an expect, which is basically the same thing as an unwrap, but it gives us a little bit more ability to kind of say, hey programmer, something's wrong here, this specific spot, here's what might be going on here. So I'm going to use an expect, and then I'm going to say unexpected failure to create editor. Now I wonder if I want I wonder if I want the error for that. What kind of error is it? Error, readline error. It's a readline error. Yeah, you know, I do want that. So instead of that, I am going to do this as a match statement. So I'm going to match on the new. And in the case where it's okay, I will just return the RL. But in the case that it's an error, I am going to ePrintLine could not create their unexpected creating editor, and then put that error. And then I will exit us because there's nothing that can be done here. So let's standard process exit 1. All right, does that compile still? Does that pass the format? Does that pass the Clippy? Yep. Okay. The next thing is this home. So he's checking to see if there is an environment variable called home. And he's using that to create his history file. So the first stage of this is that in the future, we will want to change this such that you can run without a rush history file. But for right now, because you need this, it's again going to be an editor, a match check on this to say, hey, we're going to push this onto the user, saying, hey user, you need to have an environment variable home set for me to be able to run. And that will be, we'll put a to do on this to say, hey, we need to fix this in the future because it's not always reasonable that you will be running with a home directory. So let's change that. Match on this this call, and if we're okay, then we'll just return home. But if we are an error, we don't actually care about this. So this isn't a match anymore. This is an if. Could there be another reason other than you don't have a home value set? No. Okay, so it's a if let okay home becomes that. It's an else print line rush Okay, so now we've gotten through this. Let's move this down because it doesn't belong up here. It belongs with the loop. All right, so let's keep going then. We've got the rush history format. We load the history, and of course we have to have the history right now. So it's fine to keep going here. However, this file create error should not be a developer error. So what I mean by developer error is like expect an unwrap will break the process and it will spit out an error, but it's not an error that is easy for a user to read. So if we have an error here, and it's very possible that we have a create error even if we have the home directory. So like maybe the home directory is read only and therefore you can't create the new file. This is a reasonable error to push onto the user. So instead of the expect, what we will do is if let error e becomes the create, and we want to save that error message, so that's why I'm not deleting it. E print line couldn't create history file. And let's spit out the error as well. And then we want to exit the process. And if it was created, then we won't go into that if statement. That's not an error, so we do want to print it because we're trying to create it. Because we will fail on the load history. So it's yeah, okay, keep going. Keep going. This is fine. Now this is a lot of setup work here. Let's move all of this stuff above the last exit to like a little setup helper utility. And it will return that rush history file. Is there anything else that we need to return here? We need to return this RL. Wonder why it's called RL. Read line. Okay. So we will return the rush history and the read line if everything goes correctly. And if everything does not go correctly, we've actually kind of errored early. And in the future, we should spit this out as a usage error. But for right now, just kind of quitting and printing out a generic error is fine. So we want to output the RL, which is an editor, and the string, which is that rush history. And we will take all of this stuff, put it up here, and we will return the RL and the rush history. And then we obviously have to get that information, so let RL and rush history become setup. All right, so now we've kind of made. Oh, it doesn't like this editor. Why not? Because we need to state what exactly it is. Okay. So what we've done is we've kind of lowered the cognitive load for reading main. So that means that we just have to kind of pay attention to what main is supposed to do rather than the setup and then what main is supposed to do. So that's why I broke it up that way. Why does it not like RL? Because it needs to be mutable. Okay. Okay, so we've got the setup, and it's kind of ugly, but wonder if we can do a little bit better with this. Yeah, you know what? We don't need. We can do let rush history become this guy in the happy case. And in the fail case, we are going to exit early, so that's fine. All right. And inside of main, what's going on with main? So we've got this loop where we generate a prompt, read a command, tokenize the commands, and then we loop over each of them, but we do have a break, so this can't be made into an iterator. And we have two commands that we care about at our first level. And if they are not these two commands, this exit and change directory, we're going to execute a command. Now, I think that this should not be a match statement. I think it should be a check for an exit versus something other than an exit, and that this execute command should do the generic commands versus built-in commands, because I think he's going to want to have more built-ins, more commands built into the shell. So CD is a built-in, exit is a built-in, but like the future setting an environment variable like set might become a built-in. There's more built-ins that he's going to want to do. So if I take a look at bash, if I do a built-in, it's going to, bash does it built-in. There should be a list of built-in commands. How to get that? Let's do some Googling here. Bash built-in commands, Ubuntu man page. Bash dash built-ins. So you've got bind, you've got BG, you've got alias. All of these are going to be all of these are like, alias is going to be something that he's going to want to implement here. CD, maybe not all of these things, but certainly some of them. So if I type bash built-ins, oh well, we've got the list here. Here's the list of built-ins that bash implements, and he's going to want to do a subset, a superset, something like this, more than just exit and CD. And I think he's going to want to do that inside of an execute command. So he's going to come into the execute command, see if the command is a built-in, then run the built-in commands. See if the command is not a built-in, then run it as a process, which is what he's going to want to do. But that's for future us's. That is something for the future. In fact, let's put a to do here. Exit will probably special built in, but other recommend okay. Now, is there a better way of getting this last exit status? I wonder if we can do a break somewhere here. That's something for after we rejigger this work here. So we'll push that into the future, but we're happy with this right now. Let's move to the read command call. And we've already made that one change that Clippy liked, but we see an unwrap here. I don't like the unwrap. Why are we unwrapping here? What could be the possible error? So he's saying that we do the pop to remove the trailing backslash. And then we read line on an empty string. What does read line give us? We'll read a line from standard in and we'll display a prompt. Terminal style interaction if standard in is connected to a terminal. So how can it error? Can error if it doesn't write to the prompt properly. Why would it not write to the prompt properly? It would not write to the prompt properly if there is... No, it's writing those bytes. So it would not write to standard out for a weird reason, for an exception. And it would not flush for an exception. So those are kind of developer errors. Term write line to a terminal looks a lot like a developer error as well. This read line direct, what does that do? This could be an end of file, which seems like another developer error. Yeah, getting too deep into the dependencies here, but we will change this unwrap to an expect. unexpected prompt read error. Now, do I want the error message? Yes, I do. Okay. All right. So we're happy with this read command for right now. Oh, we've got another unwrap here. What's going on here? It's similar to the one that we just looked at. How do we want to handle that? So the problem here is that we don't want to have two exact same errors, but I don't know what to say here. How do I make this distinct from the other one? We'll call this command string read error. And the other one, the prompt error. Now this unfortunately has kind of bloated the function, but it's a little bit more robust. We don't need this, but we do want. There we go. Okay. All right, so moving on to the generate prompt. So because this is kind of output making, I'm going to have to run the program to see how this works properly. However, there's one really quick thing that I think we can do here. You can see that both the if and the else here are extraordinarily similar, with the exception of green versus red. So we can make this a little bit kind of easier to. We can make this smaller, and we can let our color become if last exit status. Then we have colors green, and otherwise we have colors red. And then what we can do is we don't need two of these formattings. We can do color instead of this whole thing. So we no longer need this if statement. We can left shift all of this and we can completely get rid of all that code. Correct? We still compile, we still pass format check, and we still pass Clippy. Yep. Okay. Now again, I'm gonna have to come back to this when I feel safe in running the code. So we'll come back to that. So the execute command. Yeah, this is when with the unsafe stuff, and it's become a little bit hard to read because we have this if, and the closing brace for the unsafe is on the same line as the opening of the work if the if is true. So we want to change that up. So let's change that up by actually pulling this unsafe out and having a let child become that call. And Rust format should take care of that for us. No, it didn't. Okay. And now we call it with the child. Open. No, child.spawn. All right. So that's easier to read if we can Rust format this. Yep. So that's now easier to read. We can see what the unsafe is, and then we can kind of use it later on a little bit easier. What's he doing here? He's handling these signal things. And it jumps down into C code. That's why it's unsafe. Okay. Okay, so moving on, we've got the child spawn. If we're not command tokens in the background, and we are waiting, and this is definitely a developer error message. So we'll keep that as it is. I don't like this. I don't like this here. I don't know if there's a way that we could get rid of it though, because token is a box of tokens, and we want to only pass owned tokens in there. So we can't pass a box of tokens to the execute command. Where else is execute command being run? From the main and from... Oh, it's recursive. Interesting. So why is it a box of tokens rather than normal tokens? Or why doesn't execute command take a box of tokens? Because then the main program would look a bit uglier. And doing the star here isn't so terrible. Okay, we'll keep that in mind. We'll keep that box of tokens in mind when we look at the tokens RS. And the last one is the change dir. And how does change dir work again inside of this program? Okay. Okay, that's small and tight. We'll add a little space there. But yeah, we're certainly not worried that anything is malicious here. I do want to fix this if we can somehow. But we'll move on to tokens RS. Okay, so back up to the start. Tokens is a main com, which is a string, arguments, which is a vector of strings, or com, which is an option to the box of tokens. And then whether this process should be run in the background or not. So to implement it, we'll have a new, which will take a reference to string and whether this should be run in the background. We will split it by once by the or symbol. Don't like that. Don't like that at all. Move on. This should be an if let. So let's change that right now. If let some depcom become depcoms, we can get rid of that. We can get rid of that. This becomes an else. Get rid of that. Okay. And then we can left shift. Make things a little bit easier to read. And I don't like this initial com. So let's get this guy, this if, to return a tuple of initial com and or com. Oops. So let's set the return of this sum box tokens to, let's call this toke. And then we will return the dep underscore com dot 0 and the toke. Get rid of that. And then we will return command and none here. And we can get rid of this guy. So it takes away my worry about uninitialized variables. Maybe that's some PTSD for programming in C so long. Because obviously, as we compiled this program, Rust didn't have a problem with it, but I did. So I didn't like that, so I fixed it. I wonder why we're using a box here. We'll come to that later. Might be moving it around so much that it's heavy, because it's made up of a string, made up of a bunch of strings, and then it's made of other boxes inside of other tokens. It has internal tokens. That's why it's boxed. We'll see if we can get rid of that later. Okay, so moving on, we've got these. We're splitting up the initial com. The initial com is in the command. It's the first item in the command. So we're going to split this up. What happens if command is empty? We should probably check that. Do something if command is empty. Okay, so we're going to assume right now that command is not empty, because if it is empty, we'll take care of it earlier. I don't know how we want to take care of it right now, but we'll take care of it earlier. Maybe new can return a result. So, splitting on the white space will give you at least one parts, because command is not going to be empty. And therefore the unwrap is probably fine, but I don't like unwraps. Let's... We don't need to do that. We do want to move along parts. We do want to move along that iterator. So split white space is creating an iterator, which is parts. We take the first bit, we take the first thing, and we put it into main com. And we know that there will always be a first thing, and that's why unwrap is fine. But let's change that to an expect, because if it isn't, then something really weird has happened. Unexpected empty parts. And then he's creating a vector here. I personally like doing a vec new, but this is not my project, so I should respect his style. And he's shoving into args each arg. Okay, I get that. And then he's making the tokens struct. Okay, and that's simple enough. But again, we've got that thing of what to do if command is empty. Now I assume that he's always, whenever he calls this new, he's making sure that command is not empty before... Before is... What happens if dep... So if depcoms is split, is there always going to be a second command here? And this is an iterator, I believe. Is it? No, it's an option to a tuple. So let's be... So this is a tuple. Option to a tuple. It's an option to a tuple. So yes, there will always be a 0 and a 1. So that's fine. But again, what happens if command is empty? If it's empty, then... Yeah, I'm not sure. We'll come back to it. Okay, so are we good here? I wonder if we can do this a little bit different so that we don't have to have parts as mutable. Ah, you know what? He's probably made the right decision here. Yeah, he's made the right decision. Keep it as that. Okay, moving on to the tokenized commands. Um, do we need to be explicit? Give this compile, see if it works. Yeah, okay. We don't need to be explicit there. And because he's collecting, he needs to be explicit. And it looks like his style is to be left side explicit rather than doing the collect with the style of vec string here. So respect his style, but he does not need to be explicit there. So there's no need to be. If you don't need to be explicit, don't be explicit. But you do need to be explicit here. So stay with the explicit in the places where he want. Stay with the explicit type in the places he wants to have it, and he wants to be west side explicit there. All right. So we're looping a lot here. And I wonder, this would be so nice if Rust format gave us this, but I'm betting that it doesn't like that. Yeah, that's too bad. Okay. So it's cleaning up the white space on both sides. I think, yeah, leading and trailing white space is removed. Then we split on space and space, and then we collect into the vector of strings. Okay. And then we pop. What are we popping? Is that right? So processes is going to be the list of processes from dependent comms, which is coming from independent comms. So he's going to have like a line like ls colon pwd and ls and something like that. So he's going to split up this ls and this guy. Then he's going to split up this guy from this guy. There needs to be a space afterwards as well. I'm not inputting a space. But it won't split on that. So it continues on here with another ls. So it's kind of doing something like that. Okay. But if their line is like this, then it won't be split because there's only one thing here. So in the case of this, this is first. Actually, let's change that to PWD. This is second. So will this run the way he expects it? Come back to this because we need to run the command. And then he's got some tests in token. So we're gonna assume let's make sure our code passes his tests. Yeah, okay. So that's there's nothing malicious there. Oh gosh, I hope there was nothing malicious in his tests. I just made a big error. I did not check his tests before running them. All right, nothing bad there. Okay. Back to main. Does he have any tests in main? No. And the last file was called colors. And there's nothing weird here. Why is he allowing dead code? Because he's got a bunch of things that he wants in the future but isn't using right now. Okay. Okay, so this is there's nothing malicious here. So let's run this. And back to tokens. Let's see if it runs the way that he expects it to run. So what was that command in fish? That's how fish does it. And then if I cargo run, and I do the ls colon pwd and ls and pwd. So in it we've got the ls, then we got the pwd, then we've got the ls, and then the pwd. It's got the ls, pwd, ls, pwd. Seems to be running, but I expected this to be an R split. But I am wrong. Okay. Okay. So yeah, that's right. Is there any way to turn this stuff into iterators? No, because it would be a for each. And it's better to do the for loop like he is doing rather than the for each. What about this? Does that even compile? Nope. Okay. So yeah, he's got to have the for loops there, and he's looping through everything in background processes, and this is where he's checking for empty before he pushes to new. Okay. Those are tests. Is the new public? I believe so, because the structure is public. So that might be something we still need to check. Check if it's empty and return an error. Okay, I did say that I wanted to return. Where did I want to return to before? I wanted to return to this prompt thing. Now, as you can see, it's not generating a prompt like I like on my machine. So he's using this code of 2BA1. Unicode 2BA1, which is a downwards triangle-headed arrow with long tip rightwards. Okay. Let's not do that. Let's do something easier. Now, in the future, he's probably going to want to do an editable prompt. But for right now, let's just have a prompt icon, which is a string, and it will be equal to $symbol. Will be equal to $symbol. So instead of this guy, we will put a prompt icon. Right. And there's 2 spaces there, and you usually just want 1. So we'll take away one of these. So this looks more normal. Yeah. This looks like the prompt that you expect, with the exception that this rushing in thing is being shown to us, and it's just giving us our present working directory. So instead of saying rushing in, let's just not say rushing in. And what happens now? Yeah, okay, we'll keep that. Should we have a new line? Yeah, maybe we want a new line here. Yeah, maybe not. Yeah, I can understand why he's broken this off, because he's going to want to do a lot of changes to this, and we have that current dir unwrap here. Actually, why would you not be able to get the current dir? Okay, yeah, we don't want to break on that. We don't want to explode the program on those two errors. So, um, let's do an if let okay path becomes ender, and otherwise let's return is that gonna work? Yeah, what's gonna happen there? Don't know. Unknown is not sufficient for this call. He's gonna want so the case is you're in a directory and in some other terminal you delete that directory. The directory thus no longer exists. Let's run the scenario. So I am running right now. No, cargo run this guy as well. Actually, I don't need to do it on this one. And let's go to code, and then I'll make dir tqt, and I will go into tqt. In this guy, I will go into code, and I will rm.rf tqt. Now, in this guy, I will ls. Right, right. So, I bet you current dir gives us a good error message. So let's exit out of here and exit out of here. I bet you envdir gives us a good error message from a match. Oh. Why would this not, in the happy day scenario where we get the path, why would it fail? Because the path might have non-UTF-8 characters, which is exceptionally unlikely because I don't think Linux does things that way. Yep. Yep. So why am I putting toOwned instead of toString? I'm putting toOwned to tell future developers that I don't actually care that it is a string. I care that we have an owned value. That's why I'm using that. So here. So I've made this a lot more ugly, but I've gotten rid of that unwrap. Should I have gone to all of that work? Yes, because it is likely to do the current dir thing. So what happens in the test case? Go to code, make the directory tqt, go into tqt, rm rf code tqt, do an ls. We don't need two here. So you know what? In this case, we can format. That's what we'll return. Where's generate prompt being called? So Bash doesn't care. Bash is like, you fine. Nothing wrong with you. I don't like how Bash is handling it. That's bad. Because it would make me go... Right. And now I've got the errors instead of the errors earlier. So I like the errors earlier. So can we do this? We should do it here. Right? Or should we do it earlier? And we do want to give the user the ability to get out of this bad state. All right, that's good enough. Okay, let's finish this off because this. How to tokenize. Number 1, break down the command string into independent commands by splitting at separator semicolon. Break down the command string into independent commands by break down the independent commands into dependent commands by splitting at separator and. Then we split one more time. All right, I think we are done here on this review. So let's get out of here. Let's get out of there. Git status, cargo clean, git add source star, git commit, review step 4. What did I do? What did I do? Don't commit. What did I do? All right, so we split up. So we did, that's some kind of quality of life changes. We've added some to-dos for further research. We've handled unwraps. Made this easier for other people to enter into by making it more of a realistic prompt that spits out an error if something has gone wrong due to the current directly no longer existing or losing access via a permission change to that directory. Some quality of life, easier to read code. And that's about it. Okay, so what was the other thing? Okay, so I think that's it. So thanks for watching. Hope you had fun, and I'll talk to you later.